Well, good afternoon, everybody. This is Patrick from the Poison Pen Bookstore, and we're here with another of our virtual events. And today, I must admit, I'm very excited about a special event for us. We're talking to Richard O'Ra about his really terrific new book called Northern Heist. Let me just do something real quick here. And yeah, it's just an incredible piece of work. And we still have, this isn't one of them, we have a handful of signed copies left. So go ahead and I'll try to see if I can do double duty and put the link in the comments field. But if I just can't manage it, you know how to get in touch with us. Go to our website, poisonpen.com. We don't have many of them left. And I'll also try to be monitoring the comments field. If you have questions for Rick, go ahead and put them in and I'll see if I can't ask some of them. But Rick, it's really wonderful to meet you here virtually.
Brilliant, Patrick. Thank you so much for having me. I'm delighted to be talking to yourselves in the States. Tremendous. Yeah.
It's a strange time to be promoting a book, isn't it?
Well, to say the least, I got my second job. I got my second COVID job yesterday. I was feeling a wee bit queasy today. So, but I'm coming around okay now. But it is a strange time, and you know, we just have to get on with things. At the end of the day, we just have to get on with life. We can't lie down. We have to get up and continue on the road.
I was talking, maybe 3 or 4 weeks ago to the Irish novelist Nuala O'Connor, who has a new novel out about Nora Barnacle that's really terrific. And she's in Galway. And I was asking her the same question about, you know, how's Ireland doing with the pandemic? And I guess they're shut down in Galway again, aren't they? Well,
Ireland's doing great. I mean, up in the north here, right? There's virtually, we've got to the stage where the people that are dying weekly are in the single figures. And even those who are contacting the virus, I mean, that's also in the 3 figures, under 100. So, I mean, the north is going very well, but then our immunization program is very, very good. Although the south is catching up very quickly.
Fantastic. Yeah, I get my second shot on Friday, so I'm looking forward to that. Well, let's get down to business here. I have, as I was saying before we got started, to Rick, I have tons of questions for him, and I don't know, there's no rhyme or reason to it. So let's just kind of get into, as a way of sort of introducing the novel. There's a lot to cover before we get there. So I wanted to start by asking a little bit about your family background. And I know that you were exposed, of course, to the Irish Republican movement very early in life. Can you talk a little bit about your dad and his generation?
Yeah. My father was what we call the leader, the OC of Belfast during the 1940s campaign, IRA 40s campaign. He was the main man at that for a period of time. And he was a very, very staunch Republican. And his brothers were all the same. I mean, his brother Albie had a shootout with a cop and ended up getting 10 years in jail and 12 strokes of the cat o' nine tails. And his sons are actually living in California now, I think. So my whole family came from that Republican ethos. My father was also interned during the IRA 1950s campaign. So when I was growing up in my teens and even before, I mean, all these Republicans were coming into the house and with their wee crates of Guinness and having a drink, and they used to get me up out of bed to sing Cabin Barry. Right, so I was literally indoctrinated, for want of a better word, with this republicanism, and I thought it was a very patriotic thing to do, to fight for your country. And I mean, the people who were coming into our house, one of them was Billy McKee. Billy McKee founded the Provisional IRA virtually on his own. So this is and Bean. I don't remember, but I do remember my father saying that him and Bean called to the house once, and they went down to a bar called Charlie Gormley's, and they got stocious to get mad drunk. And that was the type, I mean, my father would have known these guys. So that was the environment into which I was born, into which I was cultivated, for want of a better word. And I had no problem with it, Patrick, because I thought it right. I mean, that Ireland should be a unitary state, that Ireland should be the people of Ireland, all the people of Ireland should have the right to live in freedom, just like everyone else. So when the Troubles broke out in 1869, I had no hesitation. I was only 15. I was actually 16. I was doing A levels at the time, which is advanced levels at school, and I was hoping to get on to university to become a solicitor. And but events took over. I joined the IRA, and in no time at all I was on the run. And then in no time at all again, I was on the prison ship Maidstone in Belfast Lock. So all the studies and all the ambitions to be a solicitor, etc., had to be literally put aside because there was work to be done, and the work to be done was fighting from the country.
It's funny, we were, for the American audience who might not be familiar with, I was asking Rick about Brendan Behan, who wrote, the wonderful Borstal Boy, and several terrific plays as well, The Hostage and Queer Fellow and whatnot. And he's not very well known in this country today, I don't think. I'm sure he's still very well remembered in Ireland.
Oh, absolutely. The Borstal Boy is a classic of classics. I mean, I seen it in Dublin. Actually seen it twice. I seen it in Dublin, and just unbelievable, fantastic, and such a writer. And he was huge in the States in his day.
Yeah,
he was enormous. He was enormous in the late 50s. I think it's late 50s, early 50s, in around then. Fortunately, he was too fond of the booze.
He was a kind of a Dylan Thomas-like figure.
Yeah.
Died way too young. But let's fast forward to, I was reading a little bit about your background and what you've been through and your experiences, which are really pretty incredible. 1976, very pivotal, important year in a lot of ways. Where were you and what was going on?
In 1976, I was on active service for the IRA. And in 1976, also, the British government introduced a policy of criminalisation, which was a policy whereby they wanted to criminalise the IRA. This is a historical policy. They'd done it in the 1920s during the War of Independence, etc. So it's nothing as if it was nothing new. But they brought in this criminalisation thing, and they said from the 1st of March, 1976, all Republican prisoners would have to wear the prison uniform. And we called it the monkey suit, right? And the first guy who they give it to, a guy called Kieran Nugent, says you're going to have to nail that to my back. So therein started what was known as a blanket protest, where we lay in our cells for over 4 years. No exercise, no reading, no, we didn't wash. We were on a no wash protest. We had beards down to our belly buttons, hair down to our belly buttons. Really horrendous, and we got murdered. We got that murdered. I mean, I don't want to go too much, but the screws lathered into us every chance they got in order to try and break us, and they did. They broke quite a few, but there was always a hardcore of blanket men, and the screws called the hardcore 300 of us. They called us the 300 Spartans.
I'll translate that to the American viewers, which is the screws. You mean the prison guards, right?
Prison guards, yeah. Sorry. They couldn't break the 300, right? They broke young lads coming in. They just literally opened the cell door, and the end of them would have went in with batons and battered them, and then the kids would have went off, right? But they couldn't break the 300, and they called us the 300 Spartans, and we were there the whole time, and it was a horrendous thing, because you got to visit once a month, and seeing your wife once a month, and you went out on that visit. I mean, you were stinking. I mean, there's no other way of putting it. You were stinking. You looked and you smelled. There was a smell. I mean, if you don't wash for 4 years, there's going to be a bit of a pong, right? So And so that you had all of that. And from my point of view, I had only been married 6 months. And my wife we had a wee baby, Bernie, who actually is my confidant, who works with me on some of these books. And I was away for 6 years, and I didn't tell her that I was in the IRA. She didn't. I told her I wasn't in the IRA, so it was a huge surprise for her when one day she was told the Brits is up and they're pulling your house apart, your fireplace and all is laying in the garden. They put in the fireplace and all looking for guns. So I had all that, and it was just a horrendous time. And then at the end of it, you had the hunger strike, during which 10 Republican prisoners died for the five demands for political status. So it was horrendous, and I happened to be in the leadership during the hunger strike in the prison. In actual fact, me and a guy called Vic McFarlane, who was the OC of the prisoners, we picked the guys that was going to go on hunger strike. And at the time, you do what you have to do because it's a voluntary thing. Nobody can be forced to go on hunger strike. But it was, when you sit back and think about it, saying, that guy would be alleged today if I had to pick them. So you have all this survivor's guilt, Patrick, and it's always there. Even now, you have survivor's guilt because of your role, because of my role in it. I'm not one of these guys that just turns my back and say, well, it happened. It happened for a reason. I get that. But could it have been different? Yes, I do think it could have been.
Yeah, as I understand it, can you hear me okay, or is there an echo?
Yeah, go ahead, yeah.
Okay, as I understand it, just to kind of summarize how you got there, you were sentenced in, was it 1977 for 8 years for bank robbery, and you ended up doing 6 or 6.5. And so while you were in there, you were just talking about the hunger strikers, and of course we've all heard of Bobby Sands, sort of the well-known figure associated with that, and others. There were. Friend of mine. Was he?
Well, Bobby was a great friend of mine. Marvelous individual.
I've been to the Catholic cemetery in Belfast, the name of which escapes me. Milltown, yeah, where they have all those really powerful murals all up and down. Yeah, that's pretty amazing. So towards the end of these negotiations, 4 of the men, and believe me, folks, we'll be getting into the novel here pretty soon, but all this is necessary, I think, to get us to where we need to go. 4 men were died initially, right, of starvation.
Yes, that's right.
And then, as I understand it, some of the demands, there was a powwow between the IRA inside the prison and outside, right?
Yeah, more outside.
And a lot of the people inside felt, hey, we need to stop this.
Well, it wasn't a lot of the people. It was only me and McFarlane, right? We were the 2 principal architects of the prison regime. And what happened was, I was the public relations officer of the prisoners, and he was the OC. So the public relations officer and the OC were absolutely connected at the hip. And I put a statement out on the 4th of July, which was very conciliatory, because I was distraught, Patrick. Distraught's an understatement, that this thing was going to go on and on and on. And I had no idea how it's going to end or in what circumstances it would end. So I put out this conciliatory statement, and within hours of it being put out, the British government, through an intermediary called Soon, also known as the Mountain Climber, was in contact with the outside leadership, i.e. Gerry Adams and several leading Republicans. And an offer was made whereby we would have our own clothes. There was other concessions as well, but the clothes one was the big one. That was the one. If we weren't wearing our own clothes, then we had won this protest, right? Now the Brits said they were going to give the clothes to everybody. We didn't care, as long as we weren't wearing them. So me and McFarlane accepted the offer, and we sent word out to Adams, and word came back in which he said, there's not enough. We're surprised that you've accepted this. considering that 4 men have died, we don't think this warrants the death of 4 men. We don't think there's enough here to end the hunger strike. And so it continued. And it continued on until another 6 men died. And it ended up on the 3rd of October, 1981. And it was difficult. I mean, I felt very inept. I mean, this was my first time with an involvement at this level of leadership. And I felt totally out of my depth. Because if it had been up to me, the offer would have been accepted and the whole thing would have ended before the 5th guy, Joe McDonald, died. It wasn't up to me, and one thing led to another, and it went on and went on and went on, and it ended up another 6 guys died. And I couldn't even, I mean, after it, I couldn't even work it out in my head what was going on. But then it did. And I realized that there's something motivated that outside leadership to keep this hunger strike going. There's one or two things. Number one, they may well have thought they could improve on the offer, which isn't unreasonable. When you're in a negotiation, the first offer is rarely the final offer. And the other one was that they needed to keep the hunger strike going until the by-election in Fermanagh South Tyrone for a seat that Bobby Sands had won. And that the Republican candidate did win that seat, and that was the launch of the peace process. That was the point where the Republican movement started to seriously say, armed struggle's not going to work, right? Now, they were saying it in very subdued tones, but the thinking was there. Armed struggle's not going to work. We need to look for another way. So that's what the issues were, but I was very disturbed with it. And in 2001, I was asked to contribute to the Boston College archive. Boston College opened an archive whereby they wanted to talk to guys who had been involved at the coalface. And the idea was that their testimonies would not be disclosed until they were dead or until 30 years later. Not too sure which is which, but that was the idea. And so I agreed to do this with a guy called Anthony McIntyre, a friend of mine, fellow blanket man. And for the first time in my life, I really sat down and told another human being, other than my wife, of course, what happened, what really happened, and what my feelings were. And I cried a bucket full of tears, because all of a sudden I was back in the H blocks and the boys were dropping like flies. And I was so
incredibly emotional.
It was unbelievable, Patrick. I mean, I said it's unbelievable. It truly was. I never expected it to be like that, right? But I'll tell you, it was horrendous for me to have to be talking it, to be saying it, and I was just distraught to the point of just totally distraught. And at the end of that particular interview of me, I said to him, do you know what? I'm not waiting until I die to write the book about this hunger strike, because I want those who are alive to answer the questions. I want to know why those last 6 guys died when we accepted that deal. And that offer, sorry. And so I just literally set about putting down on paper my thoughts, my experiences. And in 2005, in February 2005, Blanket Men, my first book, was launched, and it caused mayhem. Well, I expected it to cause mayhem, because what I was saying was that these guys have a hell of a lot of questions to answer, and so they came at me from everywhere. Everyone came at anybody that could string 2 words together within the Republican movement was coming at me and calling me liars and calling me. One guy said I was down in the park drinking with the winos, right? And there's nothing that's off limits. You know, when the Republican movement goes here, they don't hold back. But I stood by my conviction and by what I knew to be right. And a wee guy called Dixie Elliott, he was a fellow blanket man, phoned me up. He says, Rick, I've only one thing to say to you. The truth, the thing about telling the truth is you'll never get caught out telling it. And I just embraced that. And so I had good family. I had my wife and I had my kids. I had good family backing me up. And I just stood my ground and said, this is the way it is. And if any of you want to debate me in this, come on, I'm ready for it. Nobody did.
Wow. That's an incredible story. So to kind of go back a little bit, to get us into your sordid youth as a young bank robber.
Wow.
Maybe we can go back. I understand, I was reading in one of the pieces that came out recently about how you got started in the game, as it were. And as I understand it, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I was reading that you and another guy were drinking in a pub somewhere, and you ran out of money, and you had the bright idea to get somebody's toy gun and rob was it a shop, or what did you hold up?
It was a shop.
Yeah.
Right? Across the street from where we were, right? And everybody was watching us, and everybody knew. Two of us was drunk. We got 34 quid, and we went back into the pub and drunk it, right? And then I was told, we're not going to shoot you tonight, but you're getting shot. So the two of us got shot in the legs. But I mean, within a week after that, the IRA was back at us saying, come on back, you're taking your punishment, and we want you back in the movement, we want you back on active service. So that's what happened. But it's just really, it's not the proudest moment of my life, to be honest with you, but it happened. Right?
Where in the leg did you get shot?
I got shot. The bullet went through one leg and then through the knee over the other leg. One bullet done the two legs. Right. So the guy that shot me was a friend. Right. And but he was so sorry. And that he didn't mean it. The whole thing was, it wasn't that the IRA wanted to hurt us. The whole idea was that they break the flesh, right? That they don't have any bones. And the punishment was the humiliation.
Right.
That's the punishment. And that's what happened. But that's not what happened, because the bullet did go through the flesh in one leg, but it went into the other and shattered the knee, side of my knee. So, and well, it's one of those things. He who is without sin can cast the first stone.
So let's just talk for a minute about the bank robbery that landed you in prison. I don't know how much you can actually talk about that, but it's kind of a nice segue into talking about the book and then this amazing real life bank robbery that took place in 2004. So can you tell us about some of your experience as a bank robber?
We'll talk about that one. After being shot, as I say, the IRA welcomed us back with both hands. But I was an OC in Ballymurphy, so I just stood down to the rank of volunteer. So I had no control over this bank robbery, right? There was other people, there were other guys on the staff who were the planners of it. I didn't even know where it was. And I remember, but I was game for it. Had it been whatever it was, I was up for doing it. So we're in this van, and we're driving up the Antrim Road. The Antrim Road's about 6 miles long, and we're passing banks left, right, and centre. And I'm sitting with my hands between my legs because I don't want to get any fingerprints. Couldn't really wear gloves, because if you were stopped by the cops in the same gloves, they'd have knew right away you're up to no good. They're up to no good anyway, the rest of us. But anyway, I was saying, where the F is this bloody bank? And as I was saying, it was banks assuming plasters. And why aren't we robbing one of them? What's the big deal? Why are we going away out? This bank was on outside of Belfast. And it was a crazy thing. And if I'd have done a dummy run is a run, a recce beforehand, a reconnoiter beforehand, I don't think I'd have done it. So we literally went in, robbed this bank of £11,000. And it was a good old fashioned stick up. The guys run into the bank, put your hands up, right? Nobody move. The guy jumps over the counter, grabs the money and the suitcase. Everybody peels out into a white van, and we're in the white van. And the next thing, there's a cop car behind us, and they're out the window with guns. So we put all the money and our guns into a bag. There was a girl with us, and we got around the corner, dropped her off, and went on. It was a crazy chase, and we ended up crashing into an estate. And we got out, and everybody round 4 ways. It was actually clear. I mean, I was clear. I was a half a mile away from the van, and thinking I was doing pretty well, you know. And then I run across this road, and a cop car near knocked me down. So I run into the field. It was a golf course, and they came in, they hands up, etc. And then about 20 of them came and they kicked the shit out of me. And that's just the way it was. I mean, it wasn't that was unusual for me. I used to get beat up fairly regular, and that was part and parcel of being in the IRA. The enemy gets you, they're gonna give you a good kicking. And so that was basically it. And when we went to court, I got the 8 years. And I'd already been interned without trial twice before that, right? But being interned doesn't give you a record. So I got the least of the other 2 guys that was with me, and got the 8 years. And technically speaking, if you get whatever you get, you only do half of your sentence. So if you get 8 years, you should be out in 4. But because we were on the blanket, I lost 2 years of probation. So hence, I never got out for 6 years. So that's basically what happened, and that's how I ended up in prison. And
when did you get out? Was it 82 or 83?
83.
83.
I got out in 83, and I wasn't out a week. And Adams came to the door and said to me, Rick, we have 2 elections coming up here. We want you to do the PR, the public relations for them. And one of the guys who had been doing it before me, a fella called Danny Morrison, was actually standing as a candidate. So I went in and did that. And then in 1985, I was doing 15, 16-hour days in the press office, Republican press office. And then it was still at me old Southeast Ricky stuff. Never mind Bernie, I've never mind the wife, never mind the kid. It's my commitment that matters, right? And then my wife said to me, hold on, my son, here's the deal. Either you go in, stay with the Republican movement, right? Or you leave the Republican movement and you come with me and your daughter, but you're not going to have it both ways. So I went with Bernie and the daughter in 1985.
Wow. So
she was always a strong woman.
Now, well, I won't get into that. But let's talk a little bit about. I need to talk about the book here, but
yeah.
Your story is so fascinating and so moving on so many different levels, and I really want to get into talking about Jerry Conlon too. But let's talk about the Northern Heist. And there's for those of us in the States who weren't familiar with this very famous, incredible heist that took place in 2004, I believe it was, right?
Yeah. December.
Can you just tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah.
About what happened?
Well, what happened was this heist, and I'm not saying it's not politics to say it, but this heist was beautiful. There's no other way to describe it, right? In terms of the ingenuity behind it. I believe it was the IRA. What the robbers did was they held 2 bank officials. To get into the safe. 2 bank officials' keys had to be had to be together, took 2 keys to get into the safe. So what they did was they held the 2 families of these bank officials hostage, and they said to the banks, to the guys, the manager and the assistant manager, you 2 boys, there's 2 phones, get them 2 phones. You go into that bank and we'll phone you. Well, there's one guy who's in charge of it. I'll phone you and I'll tell you what I want you to do. So they went in, and don't think for 1 second that you can chop us, because, and then they took a lady away to make sure that they never, if they said to the cops, they're up in the house, the lady of the house wasn't there. So they were guaranteed silence. So the 2 guys went to work. And at lunchtime, one of them got a call and says, they made him bring a big Manchester United bag and a big, huge hold all. He says, that hold all, I want you to fill it with unused notes, all 20s. So he filled it with all unused notes, £20 notes. And they said to him, just walk out of the side of the bank, and there's an old man there who was a security guy, he's about 70. He was doting. He just put the hold all over his shoulder, walked out the door, walked up the street, right? And they said to him, there's a bus stop, and the bus stop's over here, there's a wee seat, a wee plastic seat, sit there. And the guy comes along, in my case it was Russians. The guy comes along, takes the £1,000,000 in the bag and walks away with it. And that was the genius behind it, because in that second, right, whoever robbed this bank, the IRA knew that it was wide open. There's no cops, there's no surveillance, because no cop will let you walk away with £1,000,000, right? There's no cops, there's no surveillance. This place is a gift. So what did they do? They had a big lorry, right? A huge big lorry lined up. So the guy makes a phone call, bring it in. So the lorry comes in, and when your wee man goes back to work, he's told, fill up trays, huge big trolleys with money, and pretend that it's rubbish.
Right.
And on the side of the lorry, it said Belfast City Council, rubbish. So the 2 boys push out these trolleys, right? They open the lift, they push the trolleys out, and you've already told the guy we're cleaning out all the rubbish from the vaults. They push it out into the street. The van's sitting waiting on them with the tailgate down. The trolleys are put into the back of the lorry, and the money's taken out, and they get the two trolleys back, and then they drive away. The guys drive away, and here was the audacity of this, the sheer and utter cheek. They brought the lorry back again for a second run. So once they got wherever they were going with the money and got it off, right, they said, back again. They said to your 2 men in the bank, fill them up again, we're going again. And they filled them up again. They put another £15,000,000 into the back of the lorry, and the boys drove away with that. And that's basically, and then the cops didn't even know. Nobody knew this bank was being robbed. It's a lovely sunny day, and nobody had a clue, because nobody went into the bank with guns or nothing. There's none of that. None of the robbers ever went near the bank. But they got away with £26.5 million. And they had to vote.
That's poetry.
It is. But I thought it was, I thought there's no such thing as a victimless crime. We all know that. There was people hurt here. There was a lady very, very badly abused in terms of not sexually or nothing like that, but very badly treated. But they got away, and they actually ended up having to phone the cops and tell them, by the way, we just robbed the Northern Bank. Unbelievable. And they never got the money.
Wow. So if I understand it, this was obviously a massive case in Ireland and the world. Yeah. And
well, at the time, it was the biggest bank robbery in UK history at the time.
It's incredible. And if I was reading correctly, I understand that your daughter was very instrumental in helping you provide the seed for this book, which was, I read somewhere you said, well, what if ... Yeah. The IRA didn't do it.
Yeah. Well, that's exactly right. I mean, all the talk was the British government was saying the IRA done it. Dublin government was saying the IRA done it. The unionists were saying the IRA done it. Gerry Adams was saying the IRA didn't do it, but the general consensus was this was an IRA job. So me and my daughter were at Christmas shopping actually, and we called into a wee pub down the town, and I had a pint. She doesn't particularly drink. She's having, I think it was a Fanta, and we're sitting talking about it. And I said, saying about the IRA, and I says, what if the IRA didn't do it, right? And then she says, and she started laughing, right? And then before the night was out, she'd give me the name Ructions. And Ructions is the main protagonist in the book. So we left that pub, we were only there for about an hour. We left it with the nucleus of the idea that it was an ordinary decent criminal, an ODC, who robbed this bank, right? And that his name was Ructions. And Ructions was so important because Ructions conveyed mayhem, conveyed chaos. This guy could create chaos on a grand scale. So that was the idea. And Burnout was great, but it took me, I mean, it wasn't until 2016, I think, or 15, that I actually got around to doing it, because I had the Jerry Conlon book and I had another Hunger Strike book that I had to write called Afterlives. And then when I got the Jerry Conlon book out of the way, I sat down seriously and started looking at Northern Heist. And the original title of that was Greed, right? And I loved that. Greed. Greed seemed to me to be just about sum it up, but they didn't like it. The publishers and co didn't like Greed. It was too simplistic. So we sent it out. My agent sent it out to various publishing houses, and it all came back. Patrick, it all came up. They kept coming back with rejections. Rejections is part of this game. Make it used to it. And again, it's the exact same wee problem. Her and I are sitting there, and I says, what's going on here? I knew it was a good work. You know if your piece is good. And I says, what's going on here? And she says, I tell you what's going on. It's what? She says, you killed Ructions. I says, what? You killed in the original draft. Ructions got killed at the end. She says, readers don't want to see the likes of Ructions getting killed. He has to ride off into the sunset with the saddlebags full of money. That's the bottom line. So I said, you're so right. So I literally sat down with Bernie and went over the last third of the book and totally rewrote it. And what emerged was the Northern Heist, basically, that we have today.
Tell us a little bit about well, one thing I was interested in that name, Ructions. Where does that come from?
Ructions is it means chaos. To create Ructions is to create absolute mayhem. If somebody creates Ructions, right, in a public house, they're fighting and they're arguing and they're disruptive, right? So that's where it comes from. And that was the image that I wanted this guy to portray with this fellow Ructions. I wanted him to be something extraordinary, and he is, and I love him. But I want him to be something extraordinary, and he was, and he is, and I love the name Ructions. I mean, I couldn't think of a better name for him. And even his uncle was a top gangster, but he's over the hill now. He was at the time I wrote the book, and it says, what do I want to think about him? He's strong, right? So what is strong? So I called him Panzer, after a German tank. Right, so those are the sort of things. Yeah, Panzer, right? Yeah. So those are the sort of things that I came in when I was writing the book, and but Bernie was the keystone. It was her and actually I wasn't open to the idea of not killing Ructions.
I think she may be watching, by the way, Rick.
She actually isn't. This my wife's watching.
She okay.
Go get her. Going to get her, so but I resisted the idea, right, of Ructions surviving this, and I'm so delighted that I listened to her, right, because she was right, and I mean, I'm not going to tell you, you've read the book, and so, but the ending is fantastic. And Ruxin's
Yeah.
a sound.
Now, don't spoil it for us.
Oh, no, not I.
Well-
Precious here. This is Bernie.
Oh, where is she?
Grab a pew.
Hey, hey, I'm Patrick.
I'm Patrick.
Nice to meet you. Thanks.
I was watching you.
Right on. Thanks for your important contributions to this wonderful book.
Good. Didn't think they were important at the time, but that's good.
Well, everybody needs, all readers need, they need someone who isn't a bullshitter, for want of a better word. Somebody who's going to tell them the way it is, right? And Bernie would tell me that's rubbish in 2 seconds. That sentence doesn't work, or that paragraph doesn't work, or that's repetitive, or that's a cliche. All the things that you're supposed to avoid as a writer. And Bernie would tell you in 2 seconds. So I'm very proud of her.
Well, I mean, the thing that's so incredible about it, and I must admit I have not read your previous nonfiction, but I'm going to be sure to seek it out.
Yeah.
Is the writing so fucking good? I mean, the writing line by line is so beautifully done. I mean, you've got the gift from the very first sentence with that lazy bonitis. That made me think of Brendan Behan. I was thinking about that's a phrase he might have used.
Tell me about that. Tell me about it. Well, actually, it came from Bernadette too.
Wow.
She was telling me, she was talking to a nephew, right? And he's laying on in bed and he doesn't get up to about 4 in the day. And he says, I don't know, I can't get out of bed. And she says, you know what you suffer from? And he says, what? Lazy bonitis. And he says, what do you mean lazy bonitis? It's just that your bones you're a lazy bone, you can't get up, you can't. He says, that's right, you're 100% right, right? So she said this word to me, and I says, oh, give me it, right? So I was looking for a dramatic opening sentence. I mean, to me, the opening sentence and the final sentence in any book is the most important sentences, and there it was, lazy bonitis. But you know, they say lazy bonitis is in the blood. Full stop. It's not in Rocky O'Hara's blood. Not when it comes to robbing banks. Brilliant. But I'm not saying brilliant, but it's brilliant that I got it from her.
Brilliant.
Have you ever seen, talking about the importance of first opening lines, have you ever seen that wonderful Far Side cartoon where it shows Herman Melville and he's hunched over his desk and there are all these crumpled bits of paper surrounding him? And it's like, call me Herman, call me Stanley, call me, you know.
Yeah.
And he's writing, call me Ishmael. Yeah, that's great. Well, let's talk a little bit about where the true, I mean, this is obviously fiction. It's a fictionalized account. And some of the characters you've created, you know, like the O'Hares, you know, Panzer, and particularly his sort of ne'er-do-well son, Finbar. And also the group of the IRA group, you know, the Tiny Murdoch and Coleman and some of these characters.
Yeah.
Talk a little bit about them. Are some of them based on real people you know, or are they composites?
They are, yeah. Coleman and Tiny are both based on real people, right? And Panzer isn't. I mean, the IRA wouldn't, during the Troubles, the IRA wouldn't allow a criminal, a criminal kingpin to survive that they shot him dead, right? But they are real people, and Ruxins is a real person, right? Ruxins is there's 3 different people, and Ruxins is an amalgamation of the 3 of them. And these are 3 ex-IRA, IRA people. They're very, very sharp, very, very good on their thinking on their feet. You know, they could be in a situation and they say, how do I get out of this? And they'll come up with a solution. And that's the type of guy that Ruxins is. And I based them on IRA people. You know.
Right, sure. Murdoch the same.
Sorry?
Murdoch the same way?
Yes, exactly the same. Yeah, he was IRA too. Yeah, they're all people whom I met along the way. I met along my life, I have met a huge array of fascinating people, right? Truth, I mean, my life has never really been dull, Patrick. You know, truth be told, it's never really been dull. And really, Northern Heist is people that I have met along the way put into situations, right? And they know who they are. Tiny Murdoch knows who he is, right? Um, God rest him.
The
Tiny
character
Murdoch.
named Geek.
And Geek, yes, there's a, I mean, of course, yeah, Geek is named after a guy who was on the blanket with us, a guy called Geek O'Halloran, but just used his name. But
Good name, it's catchy.
but they and the top IRA man, forget his name, but he's based on Billy McKee, the one who holds the court martial. He's based on Billy McKee, who's the guy I mentioned earlier on, who was the IRA brigade commander in Belfast, and virtually the man who formed the divisional IRA. So you've all of that, and you've all of these characters, and they're all in their own right, real characters, and that have to be, Patrick, you know, I mean, how could you really make someone like Ructions up? You could, but you would have to have some sort of foundation, you know, in reality. And that's what it was. And I just literally looked around me and said, who's he? Who's he? Who's he? I know who everyone is, right? And that was it. And it was, as I say, there's guys I met along the way. Met the same, met Bobby Sands, a wonderful guy, Brendan Hughes, the Dark, Jim Bryson. They met legends in the Irish Freedom Struggle, and they're all in there.
And what about the well, what I wanted to ask you on a larger scale is, how did your fictionalized portrayal of this heist kind of coincide with the real version? It sounds like you were very close. You were careful to be very close to the real heist.
Well, I mean, there was a fair bit of research in this.
Yep.
And I wanted to be as close to the real heist as possible, because the real heist happened, right? So I deliberately stayed as close to it as possible, and literally fictionalized it. And that was important, because I'm not too sure there'd have been any other way to pull this off other than the way that it was pulled off. I always imagined those guys sitting with this £26,500 or million pounds, $33 million, sitting in a room and throwing it up in the air and having a great time and a great laugh. You know, so it had to be close to reality. It had to be close to what really happened, and it was important for me to get that.
Right. And then you really get a sense of the two families involved, you know, the Butler family in your book, and then the Diver family.
Yeah.
You know, we really get a sense of what those families are like, you know, and what and the emotional and mental toll that all this took on them. Is that taken pretty closely from the actual families?
Mrs. Diver was taken away, right? In the book, the lady who was Mrs. Diver was taken away from the family home, so that the husband couldn't say the IRA or whoever, they're up in my house, because there's nobody in the house. So he was held over a barrel. You know, they took her away. They hid her on a farm. They didn't do anything. Nothing. There was no abuse per se, in terms of physical abuse or nothing like that. But the mental abuse, I mean, that lady was left on a cold out, was being guarded, but on a cold out barn with no roof all night. And she was in an awful state when she eventually was let go. And it was important for me. It was important for me to show that this isn't a victimless crime. There, people were really, really traumatized with this. People were really hurt. And while I thought it was a stroke of genius, the planning of it, etc., right? I knew that there was people hurt. And the wee guy, the guy who from Belfast, whose family was taken, Declan, what's his name? Declan Butler. He ended up, the guy who in real life, he ended up being charged with this bank robbery. And and actually beat the rap. So he suffered, and his family suffered the trauma of that, besides the trauma of being held in their house for guts of 36 hours. So there was pain, and I needed to show that. I mean, it's all right saying it was a work of art and it was fantastic and all, but there's an edge to this. There's an edge to this here. There's an edge to this guy, Ructions, who would be capable of shooting you in the head if he had to. You know, all of that's in here. The menace is there. The menace is there. The menace is there with the guys who held these people, and the families knew that they suspected. They always suspected it was the IRA, and you don't mess with the IRA because they will kill you if you mess with it. They will kill you.
One of the people that's watching this interview is asking about was the IRA per se involved in bank robbery, and were they using that money for IRA fund or
IRA's always robbed banks. I mean, from Michael Collins couldn't walk past the bank that he sent someone in to rob it. You know, the IRA's always robbed banks because there's no other way, virtually, of getting the money to buy the guns and all the stuff to pay for prisoners in prison to give their wage a couple of pounds every week. And so they've always robbed banks. I mean, it's robbing banks is just part of the game. You know.
Let's see. Debbie asks, have any of the people you based characters on gotten upset with your book or talking about your life with the IRA?
No. Nobody said. If they have, they haven't said to me, right? I think in their heart of hearts, the IRA is just delighted, right, that they pulled this off. And I don't think there would be a great deal of animosity towards me for writing it up in the way that it did. But I have experienced absolutely no animosity. In fact, I went to a funeral, and not long after it was released, Northern Heist, and I don't know how many people came up to me and said, "Am I Ructions? Am I Ructions? Am I Ructions?" Honest to God, they all wanted to be Ructions, you know?
Nobody wanted to be Finbar.
Nobody wanted to be Finbar, absolutely not. No. But they all wanted to be Ructions. They just adored Ructions. These are IRA men. These are the real McCoy, and they loved the thought of Ructions.
Now, what about the police officers involved in the story? Well, I guess I should ask this. Since the book has come out, has it brought more attention to this case?
Oh, absolutely.
And are they reopening it and looking at new leads? Have there been any new advancements in the case?
Well, I don't know about new advancements, but it's very much in the news. There's a documentary about it coming out next week. And
oh, really?
Yeah, by the BBC. And but it's very much, and I've even noticed that it's specifically since the release of the book in the States, there seems to be more attention now to the Northern Bank Robbery as a result of the book being released in the States, because the Irish papers are picking up what's happening over there with it, and I'm doing interviews all over the place. So there's huge interest in it, and all of a sudden it's a big issue again. It wasn't. I mean, this happened 15 years ago. So for 12 or 13 of those years, it was just nobody spoke about it. One of those things that happened during the Troubles, right? Nobody spoke about it, but now it's on everyone's lips, and they're all saying, "Was it the IRA? It was the IRA," and it's in the press, you know. And I mean, it's release of the book in America that has prompted all that, not so much in Ireland.
Now, the book came out in Ireland in 2018, right?
Yeah.
Now, did any of the family of the two families, any of the real participants in this story come out to meet you, or have you interacted with them? No.
No. No. I mean, I was very careful, and I was very conscious of this to make sure that there was no aspersions whatsoever cast on the two families. the young lad from Twinbrook beat the charge, so he was innocent, right? And the other family, the lady was taken away and subjected to horrendous ordeal. So I made sure that that was covered. It was important for me to show that these two families was innocent, and I did that. So I think that, I think they'd be happy enough, Patrick. I didn't mince my words. I was on their side in terms of what happened to them, and I had to be. Just be public.
One of the things I like is that, and that really comes through in the book, is you must have deep admiration for how they pulled this off.
Well,
it's operatic. It's yeah.
There's a guy, he's dead now. I'm going to mention his name, a guy called Bobby Story. He died there about 4 or 5 months ago, and he was the IRA Chief of Intelligence, and an extremely clever man. And actually, Big Tiny is based on him. But Big Bobby was an extremely smart guy. And I don't know if he was involved in this, but he'd have been the type of man who would have sat down and said, "Oh, well, hold on. Let's test the water. Tell him to come out with £1 million first."
Yep.
That was the genius of it.
That's brilliant,
That was the genius of it.
Yeah, and just the style that they did, to pull that off.
Well, think about it, Patrick. These guys had a van, big lorry sitting waiting. So they weren't going in for a couple of £100,000. They wanted every penny in the bank, and they virtually took every penny in the bank, So when they brought in the lorry, they filled it up with money, drove away, came back again, filled it up with money. They were coming back a third time, only it was getting too dangerous. But there you are. It's the type of thing that Big Bobby may have been involved in. I can't say that he was, but he was a very smart fella.
Yeah. Just to everybody watching on Facebook, we just have actually, I'm going overtime a little bit, but hope you don't mind. Yeah, a few more things I'd like to ask you about. So folks, if you have questions for Rick, please put them in the comments field, and I'll do my best to ask them for you. Before we kind of wrap up here, and by the way, here's another look at the book we've been talking about, The Northern Heist. Just a brilliant piece of work. It's hard to believe that this is your first novel. Have you tried your hand at fiction before?
No, that was the first, and it was the first attempt at it, and I have to say it was very liberating, Patrick, because prior to that, I'd have been going around doing interviews with people and then transcribing the interviews and then gathering up a whole plethora of information on whatever, and then writing it, and it's all factual reference and all this. I loved it. And I could go wherever I want, and I had certain ideas that I stuck by on what I needed to do. I needed to avoid cliches. I needed to have a good opening sentence, a good finishing sentence. I needed to make sure that the characters are well defined, right? And that's what I did. And I went, those were the sort of principles. There's a set of principles that I follow when I'm writing anything. I hate cliches. I hate that business of saying something. I like every sentence to be virtually brand new. Nobody else has ever written it. Jerry Conlon, for example, I'm just saying this. Jerry was a great guy. He was friends with Johnny Depp. Johnny Depp actually wrote the foreword for the Jerry Conlon book in the name of his son.
Is that right?
Yeah, brilliant, fantastic writer, great forward. Friends with Shane McGowan, he was friends with Gabriel Barney. He was a bit of a celebrity in his own right, but he made friends awful easy. So I'm sitting down and I'm saying, how am I going to describe Jerry Conlon making friends? I could say Jerry Conlon made friends very easily, or I could say Jerry Conlon made friends like Hillbillies made moonshine, right? And that's the sort of sentence construction that I look for. something totally different. Nobody else has ever written it before. You're not going to get it right all the time, but you should aim for it.
It's obvious that you're a good listener, to the specific way people speak and the turn of phrase, and yeah.
Yeah, well, I do that. I mean, I would sit in and say nothing, but somebody comes off with something particularly good, I'd say, oh, I like that, and I would say, can I use it? When Bernie came up with that lazy bonitas thing, and she didn't realize that I was looking for an opening sentence, and there it was, lazy bonitas. It's a word that doesn't exist. You made it up, but it's fantastic. So happy enough with that.
So you're working on a new manuscript now?
I am, yeah. Well, we have a book, a sequel to Northern Heist, virtually ready.
Really?
And, yeah. And I'm hoping to have it out next year.
Oh, wow.
It's called Goering's Gold, Hermann Goering, as in Reichsmarshal of Greater Germany. So it's called Goering's Gold, and it's about Russians and all the boys and everything else, and the IRA and neo-Nazis and whole a treasure hunt sort of thing, but very, very cool and very, well, very fast, you know what I mean? You need to buckle down to get on the ride, but that should, hopefully it'll be out next year.
What's it called? Goering's
Gold.
Gold, okay.
Gold ring.
Right. Yeah. Did you read Stuart Neville's book Ratlines?
No.
Yeah,
no.
you might check that out. He's a good writer.
Yes.
It's called Ratlines.
Yeah, that's where they all escaped.
Well, just a little bit about Conlon, because I did want to ask you about that. And I was reading that, a lot of us know, of course, the film version of it, In the Name of the Father, with, Daniel Day-Lewis, and it's a great film. Did they come, in your estimation, close at all, or was Daniel Day-Lewis good?
Daniel was fantastic. I thought he was great. I caught Jerry. Jerry was an extrovert. I mean, Jerry was one of these guys who would talk to anyone, and Daniel got that. Now, you have to bear in mind that it's Hollywood. So they're going to make a movie that is going to appeal to their audience. So it wasn't factually totally right in all aspects, but the basic story was right, that these four individuals, four hippies, Jerry and the three people that were charged with them were hippies. They smoked a bit of dope, right? They drank, they bet horses. Jerry loved the women. All of that had nothing to do with the IRA. The IRA wouldn't have had them. And the cops in London needed someone to charge for the Guildford Ball. And there's four likely people. It's a wee girl that nothing to do, never been in Ireland in their life. So they looked at them and they charged them, and they got 15. They got life. And after 15 years, they were released.
After the real person confessed, right?
Well, not really. No, they were released. They were released because it was found out that Patrick Armstrong, Jerry's co-defendant, that the statement he was alleged to have written had been written by a cop. The statement of admission had been written by a cop, so therefore his statement didn't stand up. And the thing about it was, they all implicated each other. So if one statement didn't stand up, and the guy who didn't stand up says he done it, and she done it, and none of it stands up, so they got out. But it's a great story, because Jerry came back to Belfast about 2006, and he and I just took up, because we were best friends. I lived in 6 Peel Street, and Conlon's lived in 7 Peel Street. So me and him grew up together from the cradle. So we went out every week, sometimes twice a week, and we would have a breakfast, and we would just talk. And it was one of them sort of, you're talking to a mate, and you can say whatever the hell you want, and he's not going to blabber it out, so we could talk. And we were in Belfast City Centre one day, and he said to me, I want you to read my book. And I says, what do you mean? You read your own book, right? Proved Innocent. And Jim Sheridan done the film. Daniel Day-Lewis played you. What more do you want? And he says, effing My story hasn't been written. The real story about Jerry Conlon didn't start the I got out of jail. And I mean, I didn't really know the real story, so he kept harping on it. And I says, oh, I'll do it. At the time I was finishing off another book, I says, you'll have to wait though. He says, I don't care. You just promised me you'll do it. So about 6 or 7 months later, I got a call from his sister saying, Jerry's in hospital and he wants to see you. I says, what's he in hospital for? And she says, Richie, she called me Richie. Richie, it's not good. So I went down to see him. And he said to me, I have 2 weeks to live. I'm going to be dead in 2 weeks. And it was awful. I mean, the two of us hugging, awful seeing that, hearing your mate say this. And then he says, you promised you'd read that book. I says, no, well. And when you do it, you keep your promise. Yes, I will. And as I was walking out, he says, Richie, I love you. And I said, yeah, sure, I love you. And that was the last I seen him. But he was, but
how old was Steve?
Jerry was 60.
Jeez, wow.
It was 3 months between him and me. Jerry was 60 and he couldn't believe it. Why is this happening to me? And and then when I sat down to write the book, Shane McGowan's sister, Siobhan, said to me, Rick, why don't you get Johnny Depp to write the foreword? Johnny Depp? I says, will he do it? And she said, leave it with me. So I got a call about 3 nights later, about 12:30 at night. Johnny says he'd be honored to do it.
Wow.
And he did. He kept his word. Sorry?
They knew each other then, obviously?
Well, they were great friends.
Really?
When Jerry was in London, they literally went out and partied together and had a great time and done what they did. I mean, the Jerry Conlon story is, from he got out of prison, one of absolute tragedy, but there's also fantastic humor in it. But, that was great. That just came straight in and says, I'll do it. And when the time came, this marvelous, and that's the only way I could describe it, this marvelous foreword, about 4,000 words, landed on my desk. And here's me. Wow, well done.
I can't wait to get a copy of that.
Yeah. Well,
is it published in America?
I don't think so. I
can find one. You mentioned Shane McGowan. It's funny. Well, I was just talking about Shane McGowan with another writer the other night, really remarkable guy named Willie Vlautin. Right. It's a terrific, Willie Vlautin, excuse me. And we were talking about Shane, and I've seen that documentary that came out with Julian Temple. Wow, it's amazing. I'm amazed that Shane is still alive.
I just think he's marvelous. He doesn't give a shit who's there. He'll say whatever the hell he wants to say. And he doesn't. He's so irreverent. It's fantastic. Yeah. And I love guys like that. Right? I love guys who aren't at all pretentious, who say what they think, and that's his language, and so be it.
Well, and yeah, I mean, he's obviously a brilliant writer. You know,
fantastic. I mean, some of the stuff that we have a play. There's me and another guy have written the Jerry Conlon story up as a stage play.
Oh, really?
Yeah. It's going to be opening here in Belfast. I think it'll be the first. It was supposed to run for. It was actually sold out for a 10-day run. And the Lyric Theatre in Belfast was sold out. You couldn't get a ticket, and then COVID hit and it was cancelled that particular night. So when they open up, which will probably be about August, I think it's going to be the first play on, I imagine. But again, McGowan's background music, really needing Soho and stuff. That's all a part of it.
Yeah, I mean, you can draw a line right to who wrote The Old Triangle.
That was Behan's brother, Dominic Behan.
Yeah. Well, there's a line between McGowan and Behan, certainly.
Oh,
a lot of different ways.
Yeah. Brilliant.
Well, we digress, and but thanks for sticking around a little bit longer, everybody. It's been a real delight talking with you, Ricky.
Patrick, thank you so much. It was lovely. Can I say I enjoyed the crack.
Now, are you still on the no-fly list, or can you come into the United States yet?
Still no fly.
Shit.
Yeah.
When are they going to let you in?
Oh, I mean, I haven't been arrested for 1977. I mean, that's 43 years ago, and they still won't let me in. Then it's pretty bizarre. I mean, isn't this and all can get into America?
That's crazy.
You know, and we can't, I'd love the guy was in. I mean, me and the wife and the kids had four years in America and down in Florida and in Boston and New York, and we loved it. Seeing Braveheart in Times Square. I was only out.
Who knows? Maybe
Well,
by the time your next the Gehring's book comes out, Gehring's Gold books comes out, you'll be able to travel, and we can have an event here in the desert, because we're in I'm not sure if you know, we're in Scottsdale, Arizona.
I think,
So this time it's getting a little warm right now, but it's just beautiful out here in the winter. So we'll have to have you out.
Brilliant, I love that.
Here again is the book, and we have just a handful of signed ones left. So the holidays are coming. Buy copies for your friends.
Brilliant.
But anyway, thanks again. And
My pleasure, Patrick. Thank you so much.
And say hi to Bernie. Okay.
I will, of course. Bye. Bye.
Hello. We hope you're enjoying our programs and podcasts with authors. We'd like to expand them, and your help would be appreciated. Please make a donation at poisonedpenfoundation.org. 100% of the proceeds will go to help connect authors with readers in this difficult time. Thank you.